Let's take a look at today's lesson. Today we will be performing operations with functions. We will explain the steps we need to take when performing operations with functions. So let's take a look at today's lesson. So today's do now, what we are asked to do is answer the following, and I am going to give you some time to do this, and we will see if we end up at the same answer. Okay, so here is what we should have gotten for our do now. I color coded my work to make it easier for all of you to follow. So I know that I have been given my input, which is 4a minus 3. I input that into my f of x function. Wherever I see an x, I'm changing those. So I have to follow order of operations, right? I start off with my exponent, which is to the third power. So I rewrote that 4a minus 3 times. I started doing FOIL on my first two. I got 16a squared minus 24a plus 9. I dropped down the original 4a minus 3 and I did FOIL on that again. A little more involved since I have a trinomial times a binomial. For the negative parentheses, 4a minus 3, my original piece highlighted in green, I just distributed that negative 1 from the start just to make it easier on me. And I just kept dropping that down. At the very end, once I had all of my terms distributed, I was able to combine like terms and I end up at my final answer. Some polynomial with 4 terms. For these questions, what we need to be careful with is our algebra. So let's look at our thinking for today and what it is that we're doing. So today, what we are doing is we're going to be answering or trying to figure out how do we perform operations with functions. We know there are 4 operations. We have sum, we have difference, we have product, and we have quotient. We have done these operations since elementary school, and we are going to apply that to functions. So we have been given 2 functions, an f function and a g function. And if I see for my sum, f plus g of x, what that is telling you to do is you have been given some input, in this case, a simple x, and you're going to take your f function and input that input and add your g function, inputting the same input. The same thing goes for subtraction. So we have our f minus g of x. In this case, what they're telling us to do is, again, I have my input x. We are going to start with my f function, input that given input, and subtract the g function given that input. Be very careful with subtraction. I'm going to add brackets in here because we're subtracting the entire thing. So that I have to be very careful with. For a product, we have f times g of x. In this case, what they want us to do is take our input and input it into both functions, so f of x, and we're multiplying g of x, g of the input. So I need to make note that x in this case is my input, but we can be given any input. And lastly, we have a quotient, a division, f divided by g of x. In this case, what we are doing is we have been given our input. We are going to take our f function, input that given input, divided by the g function with the given input. One quick note you must make sure is that your denominator, in this case, g of x, is never going to be equal to 0. Why? Because we're dealing with a function. And if I have a denominator of 0, I have an undefined situation, which means that I don't have a function. And I do want a function. So this is very, very important. So let's look at our first example. Okay, so here in this example, we are going to perform the basic operations with functions. We have been given 2 functions. A f function, f of x, is 3x minus 1, and g of x, which is a quadratic, x squared minus 2x. So we have questions 1 through 5. We're going to be using this rule or the given rules for the given operations. So let's look at number 1. For number 1, we have a sum. I have f plus g of x plus 1. So I know this x plus 1 is my input. I'm taking my f function and inputting that given input, and I'm going to be adding my g function with the same given input. So I like to note it just so I make sure I input the given information. Now that I have that, what we want to do is look at the rule that we originally had for f of x. So in this case, my f of x was equal to 3 input minus 1 plus our g function is x squared minus 2x. In this case, our input is x minus 1 squared minus 2 times the input. Here's my input. Here's my input. In my rules, I've inputted those pieces. So now it's a matter of me doing some algebra, so I'm going to quickly do that now. So I did my distribution, I did my foiling, going to combine like terms. Okay, so after doing my distribution and combining like terms, we end up at the output of x squared minus x minus 1. So let's look at number 2. For number 2, we are subtracting. So we're doing f minus g when your input is x plus y. So what this is telling us to do is take your f function, input x plus y, subtract your g function when you're inputting x plus y. All right, so here is my new input, x plus y, x plus y. So what we're going to do is take our f function, which was 3x minus 1. So in this case, 3 times the input, minus 1, subtract the g function. Remember what I said about subtraction? I want extra brackets there. So I'm going to be subtracting the entire g function. So here is my substitution piece. Be very careful with that g function. We're subtracting the entire g piece. So I'm leaving that in brackets till the very end until I'm able to do my combining piece. So here, what we're going to do is the distribution first. So I'm going to quickly do that for both sides. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm going to do. I did my distribution on the 3 times x plus y. I did my foiling and I distributed on the g function side. So at this point, this is when I'm going to actually get rid of those brackets by distributing the -1 to every single term. So I'm going to do that. And we end up at this new polynomial. My last step is combining like terms. And since this one's a long one, all I'm going to write is my arrow piece and my final answer. So this is my final answer. -x squared minus 2xy minus y squared plus 5x plus 5y minus 1. Let's take a look at the next question. All right, so for number 3, what we are going to do is we're going to start the same way. Here's our input. We are asked to do a multiplication, so we are going to set ourselves up. So I am doing f with the given input times g with that given input. So I am going to substitute now. There's my substitution, my f function. I'm going to, instead of putting the dot, I'm going to use these parentheses just because we're going to be multiplying at the end. So I'm going to start with the f function first. And as I work my way down, I end up at 6x plus 2. I'm going to do the same thing with my g function. And I get, as I work down, I end up getting 4x squared minus 1. At this point, we're going to distribute, and if we have any like terms, we'll combine them. All right, so I end up at 24x to the third power minus 8x squared minus 6x minus 2 for this one. I make sure that my answer is written in standard form. Let's try the next one, number 4. We have been given our input. We are going to set ourselves up. I am going to substitute. Okay, so I substitute into the f function, I substitute into the g function. I'm going to simplify the numerator, simplify the denominator. Okay, let's clean it up one more time, and we get our answer of So our final answer, when we divide these two functions with that given input, we got negative 3x plus 5 divided by x squared minus 2x. Let's take a look at the last question. For the last one, it got a little complex. We have 2 times the f function minus 5 times the g function. That's how I'm reading this. Twice my f function minus 5 times my g function, where my input is 3n plus 2d. So I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing. I'm going to rewrite it so it's easier for me to visualize this. So this means twice the f function when my input is 3n plus 2d minus, don't forget what I said about the subtraction, you must make sure you subtract the entire thing. So I'm going to put extra parentheses or a bracket, 5 times the g function when the input is 3n plus 2d. Now that I have that, I'm going to actually rewrite into my function pieces. So we have our f function is 3x minus 1. But we're doing twice that. So we have twice my f function, which is 3 input minus 1. There's my first piece. That's my f function. Minus bracket or parenthesis 5 times the g function. So what's our g function? Our g function is x squared. So I'm going to need extra parentheses here. Our input squared minus 2 times the input. Now that I have that, what I'm going to work with is my f function piece first. Now be careful, because what you want to do before you distribute that 2 from the outside is do everything inside the parentheses. We have 2 times 9n plus 6d minus 1. Now I'm able to distribute that 2 to everything. So I'm going to just work with that function right now. So my first function, which is f, would end up at 18n plus 12d minus 2. Now that I have that, what I'm going to do is the g function. So I'm taking away 5 times. But I have to be careful again, because I need to do all of this stuff inside the parentheses first. The foiling piece and that distribution piece before I distribute the 5. So I did do that. I distributed, I foiled. Now at this point, I'm going to, there's no like terms, I'm going to distribute that 5. All right, now that I have that, what I'm going to do is distribute the negative 1. And finally combine like terms. After all of that, this is where we end up, a long answer. I'm just putting my answer with this arrow. So sometimes I will do that. Sometimes you will see me write the original problem out, but most often that arrow will tell me that that's your final answer. So keep learning, keep growing. Be careful with questions like number 5.